Another episode here of Getting There with Goz, talking about the career journeys of media members, coaches, athletes, business owners, and more. And if you follow Gozilla Media, you know that I'm a professional wrestling fan. I love the WWE, AEW, all different levels of professional wrestling. And I knew with SummerSlam just around the corner, I had to reach out to one of my pals, my young media friend from way back when. I know you as John Carter. Some people may know you as a different name, but I'll introduce you as John Carter. You can change your name if you want during this interview. So at the beginning, 6, 7, 8 years old, tell us what you wanted to be as a kid. Where'd you grow up? And was it your same dream job when you were 18 years old?
Well, thanks for having me on. You know, we used to be in an unofficial group called the Lunch Club back when we were taking the Syracuse radio market by storm.
That's right. Me, you, and Jack Ryan, the Lunch Club.
Yeah, the Lunch Club. It was a glorious time in my life. John Carter, I haven't been John Carter since 2015 when I left. This is the first time I've put the Carter pants back on, as they say. So John Carter, yeah, that's how I was known when I was on the Syracuse radio station with Goz and others. John Mongiello is my legal name, but we can go with John Carter, JC, whatever. You know, fun fact about John Carter, I was actually wanted to be John Connors, like from Terminator, and was told nobody would get it. So I was given John Carter. So
wait a second. You know what? We got to pause right there. Even though we usually open with like the starter stuff, that story in itself isn't good enough, because we're talking about Tom Mitchell, who is the operations manager and the program director for 93Q, which is one of the legendary stations in Syracuse.
Yeah.
And this is a Tom Mitchell question, not even an us question we can really answer. His thing at that point in the mid 2010 decade was to give his on-air DJs superhero names or action star names, because Jack Ryan, that's not his real name.
No, it's not.
And the fact that it's John Carter versus John Connor, which, you know, John Carter is one of the biggest bust films in action movie history, and John Carter's the Terminator.
Yes, I know. And maybe it's because John Carter was only a couple years old at that point, and maybe because some people who've been in the game for a while, they hear old names and they're just like, none of the kids are going to get that. See, that's my Vince impression. Not even intentional. It's just what I do now. Vince McMahon impression. So he was probably just like, none of the kids know who John Connor is, but you know what they like? John Carter. Here you go. And I was like, okay, who am I? I just graduated college, so I'll take it. Fine. And now I guess it's endeared to some people like yourself. And now it's, you know, but yeah, I guess we can tie that in to answer your question. When I was 6 years old, it's funny you mentioned that specific age as an example, because, one of the famous stories that I tell in my family, that I've told to employers going through jobs, was when I was 6, we went to Disney World, and I took the park map and I rolled it up like a microphone. I was interviewing random people, like waiting in line or coming off rides, like the people on the news. So, and I didn't know why I did it. I didn't even watch the news that much. My parents were not media people, so it's not like my dad or uncle or anybody was on the news. It's just kid thing. Instead of, you know, people pretend to be like superheroes or policemen or whatever, and I pretended to be a newscaster at Disney World at Epcot. So that was the first time I was like, I could do that. And then I kind of always wanted to do that after that.
Yeah, you're 18. You still want to do it when you're younger. So you're like pursuing that, you know, from like a kid on, that's what you want to do. And when you hit high school, you got to pick where you're going to go to college, and you do pick a college that is known for broadcasting.
Yeah, I went to SUNY Oswego, which is about 45 minutes north of Syracuse. And in case somebody doesn't know that, I feel like a lot of your listeners might know that, but in case you don't, it's on Lake Ontario. Beautiful spot. Unbiased opinion, best SUNY school, and that's totally not biased at all. But yeah, I went there on the strength of their broadcasting, communications, journalism, you name it program. So actually my first school was SU, but they said that I was not smart enough or good enough to get in. So I was like, okay, that's fine. So I'll go to Oswego then. Originally planning on switching out of Oswego after 2 years, but then I loved it so much that I stayed. Plus, it was way cheaper. And
there it is. Everybody who says Oswego, it's like the drinking game. If you find out someone's from Oswego, they say it was cheaper. Every Oswego Laker we've had on has said that same term. I was waiting for you to say it, and if you didn't say it, I was going to prompt you to say it.
Even if you just think of SUNY, right? Like as far back in my day when I was there, I'm pretty sure all the SUNY schools had a similar baseline tuition, so it was definitely cheaper. But education-wise, it was still not that I went to college to compare, but learning since then, because I graduated in 2014. It's the education is on par because those big schools like Syracuse, for example, they're world famous great institutions, but it's really there's so much more competition, and then it falls on you how you take your education and your opportunities and get internships or jobs or meet people to get you in the door somewhere. So you could go to Harvard, and if you don't follow up on the opportunities you get, you're not going to, go anywhere. Just gonna be, oh, look, you went to Harvard. That's cool. But, who do you know? What did you do? So I think I got a great education, and I think I would have got one at Syracuse, but I definitely got one at Oswego. I can say that because it hasn't hurt me yet. And I'm in less debt. So, but yeah, I took my 6-year-old dreams of interviewing annoyed parents at Epcot into school, where I then turned into internships, turned into my first professional job, which was working as one of your peers in the Cumulus media stations in Syracuse, like 93Q and the Score. So working with the rest in peace Syracuse Chiefs, but welcome to the world Syracuse Mets now.
Yeah.
Much better in my opinion. And, so that's pretty much how, in the brief summary, how I went from 6-year-old child to educated man.
Well, let's talk about that Oswego stuff, because you're talking about those opportunities, those activities, those spots in which you can improve your broadcasting skill. Specifically at Oswego, what type of opportunities did you kind of pursue? Was it play-by-play broadcasting? Was it studio hosting? Did you have music in mind?
Yes, to all three. So people love a good goody two-shoes story. No, they don't. But in my case, I was like, how the hell can I just show up and start like wrecking shit? Okay. So I showed up, moved into my residence hall / dorm. I was an RA, so I call it residence hall because we've been drilled that it's not just a dorm. Anyway, so I went there, moved in my first day of freshman year. And as soon as my parents left, I marched I was going to say ran, but I don't really run. So power walk to the radio station and was speaking to the first person in there I saw, which happened to be the general manager at the time. And I was just like, I'm John. I just got here. And he's like, I know. I was like, okay, well, I just got on campus. I want to do the radio station. So within like a week, I was hanging out with him outside, learning about the radio. And he had an internship, so he was talking to me about that. And then I went to the training program. And then eventually I was a music DJ. And then I had a talk show, which was pretty successful out there. A lot of listeners. And just before we knew how to podcast, so we would stream online, and we had some good stuff. Actually, that helped me get my interview or conversation with Tom Mitchell and the Syracuse team. But before that, another thing I got from there was an internship in New York City with Elvis Duran in the morning show, which is a very, very famous, very popular FM talk show that's all over the country. So I had that talk show, and I used that to apply, and it kind of opened the door for me to get an interview. So I was an intern with them for 2 years, which was unbelievable.
Yeah,
first thing I did.
Let's sit on that. No, let's sit on that, because that's kind of why I wanted to go back a little bit, because I was not going to let you skip over the Elvis Duran stuff.
I can't skip over that. Come on.
No. So for those who don't know, we're talking about Z100, the Z Morning Zoo. Elvis Duran, again, you kind of set it up well there. This is one of the most well-known, nationally syndicated morning shows in the U.S. You're an intern. Take us through your responsibilities and what you did during your time as an intern there in the city.
So the first thing to become an intern, and as you find out when you apply for jobs, there's a sea of people. Sometimes it's just luck of the draw that your name gets pulled and they look at your resume or your cover letter and talk to you. So out of all the people that applied, I happened to get an interview. And then of the interviewees, I happened to get, I can't say hired because I wasn't, but picked and interned, I guess, selected from the lineup. So I was hired to be a video intern because, now it's not just one thing. You know, like even this podcast, I mean, we're recording video, but it's audio, and you can't go on anything YouTube and just have the YouTube channel. They have a podcast, they have a TikTok channel, they have an Instagram channel, they have, everything. So that was when they were trying to bridge the gap between audio only and social media everywhere. So I was hired as one of the first video production interns. And my first day on the job was actually like I signed all my paperwork, and then they were like, all right, so Justin Bieber and Scooter Braun are downstairs. I need you to go down with this camera and film them coming up and take the elevator up with them and get the whole thing on camera. Oh, and give some extra security because the fans are crazy. Because this was like June of 2012, and Justin Bieber was like the most famous person in the world. You know, it was like Bieber and then Jesus was like the list. So, so when you have Bieber in the middle of downtown Manhattan, in Tribeca, where the studio was, girls like preteens to young teenagers to like middle-aged women. It was kind of creepy, honestly, the balance, but all sleeping on the street overnight to be there at the front of the building when he was showing up.
Sleeping on the streets?
Yeah. Oh, it was absolutely disgusting. Yeah. Like post-COVID, you look at it and you're like, it's unbelievable. But even then, I was just like, I mean, it's Manhattan, and it's New York City. It's, it's hot. And y'all are gross. I can smell all of you from here, and I'm in the building. So, but that was the first thing I did was film Justin Bieber, and I'd never met a celebrity before, So you go from going to school in upstate New York, and then all of a sudden you're in your first, big boy job, and they just throw you right in. It was right into the fire, and it didn't really slow down from there. There was always somebody cool coming up, or I always had to go somewhere. Like I went to the Wolverine premiere, the red carpet, to film Hugh Jackman on the red carpet and all that stuff, which was crazy. So that was just what it was. And it was radio, but I wasn't doing anything on the radio. I was doing video production affiliated with the radio station so that they could branch out their brand, which is all that's about these days, is content and branding and stuff.
Yeah, and I think some people may be a little confused by that just because of that separation where you may not be working directly with Elvis Duran. Scary is who you're working more directly with, right? Because there's almost a separation on those radio shows.
Well, I mean, in a way, I was working as a part of the team, but the studio that I was working in was in like the back part, like because the whole studio was up front, and then I was in the back in this little room, which I'm sure is much more, defined and spacious now. But then it was like the whole radio crew and the engineers, and then there was actual radio specific interns. So there was 3 different departments of interns. There was like the radio, and there was like a promotional intern, and then there was me as the video guy. So I was working with them directly, but not on the day-to-day show. Like sometimes I'd come in and film the guest that was on, and then when the guest segment was over, I would leave and do something else. So I wasn't making the show. I wasn't helping it go on. I only went on the actual air once, which was crazy, because he called me in because I was following somebody around, and they asked me a question, what I was doing, as a gig, as a bit, as part of the show.
Yeah.
But otherwise, like, they would go on all the time and help make the show. So totally different, but we were all working for the same goal. This is like, how do you keep the show going when the show's over? Oh, watch this video from the show.
Wait a second. Don't leave me hanging here. You gave me half that story of you going on the air. Elvis Duran calls you and sees you walking around following somebody. Don't leave it hanging. What happened after that, and who are you following?
All right, so Greg T used to be on the show. He's since left the show. He was one of the most famous co-hosts of that show. He was there from the inception. And my assignment for the day was to follow Greg T around with a camera all day, but not tell Greg T why I was following him around with a camera.
What a great bit idea, by the way.
So he was getting first of all, he was like, oh, it's a bit, but then and I wasn't supposed to answer his questions. So he kept asking me, after he started getting pissed off, what are you doing following me around? What's the bit? It's not funny. And that was building to the bit that he was just so pissed off that I was ignoring him, but filming him. So he went into the bathroom, and I pretended I was going to follow him into the bathroom. I was always going to stop outside, but he was making a scene I was following him in as a joke. So afterwards, he went in for his, he was on every 10 minutes on the show. So he checked in, and then he was just like, intern John was going to follow me into the bathroom. And then Elvis Duran was just like, what were you doing following Greg T into the bathroom? So that was how I made my one and only live on air appearance on the Elvis Duran in the Morning Show.
As much fun as you're having with Elvis and the crew, the internship ends, and you've kind of hinted at this already. So you've got this internship, you've got Oswego, and that timeline is nice for you because you graduate in 2014, and you're quickly able to transition into a paid opportunity at a radio station probably about less than a year after graduation. So take us through that process of, you mentioned this a little bit already, how you're able to use that experience to land that first job at Cumulus Media in Syracuse.
So I actually was one of the fortunate people to have a job lined up right after college. Actually, before college ended, I met with Tom Mitchell, who you've mentioned a few times today, because Jack Ryan was one of my friends and also went to Oswego, and he was interning and transitioning into working there. So I was talking to him about it, and he knew my radio show. He had been on my radio show a few times as like to learn how to radio and then to, have his own show. So we kind of had a rapport and a friendship. So I asked him if I can get involved with where he was going to work for real. So he hooked me up with Tom Mitchell, had an interview. He liked the stuff I showed him and whatever. And then he's like, when you graduate, we'll start and you could do whatever. So that's how I got it, which is it's hard. So I'm very appreciative of the fact that I had that opportunity immediately, part of the networking and who I knew and just taking advantage of stuff. So yeah, I mean, I went from doing that, the internship, to having this job, and it was totally different. Big markets like New York City, LA, for example, Miami, they're huge media places. So me going in, I didn't expect Justin Bieber to show up, to the Syracuse station. No offense, Syracuse. I don't know if Bieber's hanging out there a lot these days, but I didn't know it was going to be as different as it was. It was almost like a culture shock. Like, is this radio? Is this what I went to school for? Is this what I was doing on my own talk show? Is this what I had an internship for? Like, this is totally different because it was so 9 to 5. It was so routine. You come in, you do the same thing, and you leave, you go on the air. I was doing traffic and weather reports also. So it wasn't as quote unquote glamorous. It wasn't as exciting in that way of the starstruck, but it was exciting because I was actually on the radio, and people that I met when I spoke to them and said what I did, a few times they recognized my voice, or they said they did, which was cool. And it really shows that you really do have, like, there is a big pillar in your community, the radio. Less so, I guess, now, especially with Spotify and satellite radio. But even then, like, typical FM radio is still huge in like a city like Syracuse.
Oh, especially 93Q, where people have come through that station. Yeah. It's been known for decades upon decades. And just one little quick fact here for Syracuse people who are listening. John mentioned that Bieber might not be stomping in there. There's an old legend, and I think it's true, that a young Bieber, like 12 or 13 years old, performed at the New York State Fair. And he actually held a private concert for everybody who worked at Cumulus Media in the old break room. So it's little Bieber with a guitar who played like a bunch of songs for everybody. So that's an old myth. I think it's true. So it's just funny you brought that up, where it actually did happen.
Oddly specific for it to be a myth.
Right?
You're like, as a matter of fact, I was there.
I was not there. Justin, I love you. No, that was not me. Although some people will now believe that I did watch Bieber yelling and screaming. So
You're
not only
live that down.
No,
it
won't.
happened now. It's canon now. It happened.
So you were working out the weekends for 93Q.
Yeah.
I believe you were doing promotions as well, and you're also doing traffic. So you had like a bunch of different roles, if my memory holds correct.
Well, I was kind of doing promotions, not really. It was one of the things that I was like doing, but I was always like the third or fourth guy. So it was like Jack Ryan and somebody else. Probably his now wife was doing it. Time.
Rachel. Yeah.
Rachel. Yeah. So the two of them were like the leads on it. And then maybe a DJ from one of the stations, so whether it was Rick or even Tom or,
Ted Namey,
Ted
Smoothie,
Marty and Shannon. So any of those people were there. And I was kind of like, I did like a state fair gig. Well, actually, I was helping build the stage at the state fair, and my cell phone broke, and I didn't have a cell phone for like 3 weeks. So I had to go to an old flip phone for 3 weeks, which was absolutely horrendous. That was like the only real promotion thing I did. I broke my phone while doing construction. And I was like, first of all, there's no hard hats, but this is a safety hazard. Second of all, I didn't sign up for this. And third of all, I don't make enough money for you to even approach you about asking to fix my phone. So it was just a miserable, hot summer day in the central New York fairgrounds.
Yeah. And also about that phone, I hope your memory has this somewhere in there, because I could have sworn, because at this point I'm hosting the morning drive. Okay. Ted and Amy are in the morning, and Marty and Shannon are in the morning, and you are doing traffic. Now your phone is broken, and you're using a flip phone, which I believe does not have an alarm, or it has some bad variation of alarm.
Sure does not.
No, because you're supposed to get there at like 5:15 or 5:30 in the morning. And do you remember the day Marty was going to kill you for showing up at like 6:01 in the morning?
Yeah, so I do remember that day. And granted, you have to take the blame because it was my job to get there. Like my one job was to get there, do the traffic and weather, and then go. I don't even know if it was weather. Definitely traffic. Do it and go. And I remember like there's only happened 2 times in my life where, and it was here from us. I lived in Oswego at that time during when I did that. So from Oswego to Syracuse on a good clear day, it's about 40 minutes. Okay. This particular day was not clear. It was super stormy and I couldn't see because it was dark still because it was 4:30 in the morning. I would have had to leave 4:45. So I'm driving in the snow or sleet or probably all of the above. And it's only on the one main road that goes from Oswego to the on-ramp to 81 or whatever. It snows the whole time. As soon as I get onto the main highway, everything clears up. So I'm trying not to die and stay awake at 4:30 in the morning, driving, listening to the station, hoping that it's not my cue. And as I'm like approaching, I'm like going down James Street in Syracuse where the station was. I'm like a mile away, and I'm like, if I can just hit these lights, I can rush right in, do it real quick. And all of a sudden, the wrong break plays from the day before. And I'm just like, well, that's unfortunate. Let's hope nobody heard that. And then they did. And then they got mad at me for that, which was my fault. I could have left at 3:30 in the morning, I guess, if I only looked at the forecast.
Yeah. And look, it was a learning lesson. That's what this whole podcast is about, where it's like, you thought you nailed it. You only missed it one time. But if someone's hosting a morning show, it's like, okay, lesson learned. I'm sorry. I screwed up. It's my fault. I'll take the ripping. Like, that's a part of this, especially for entry-level people. Even though you've got the job and the foot in the door and everything, the pressure does not all of a sudden come off just because you got hired at that station.
You get a little complacent sometimes, because, up to that point, not that it's not like it's easy to recognize when you screw up, but when you do it well and people say, especially when you're new, like, oh, good job, or you nailed that, or that was a good traffic report, or like you got in perfect timing, whatever. Not that it gets to your head, but you kind of get comfortable. So you kind of feel a little bit like, well, I have a little bit of room for error. Like say, even as small as like the audio was low or your audio peaked or, you put the wrong sound effect at the end for the different station because we would record for 3 stations at once, little things like, all right, next time don't do that. So in the back of your mind, you get a little bit, I guess, used to the way it's been going. And it's not invincibility, but it's like a little bit of like a layer of, like they know I'm good at this.
You think got some swag to yourself.
A little confidence, maybe a little swag over confidence. But one thing I've learned just throughout my whole career is that would have been so much worse if I tried to, and I did make a little bit of excuse, not to deflect blame, but just to say like, here's what happened, not saying I did it right, but here's why it happened, knowing that I'm going to own it and just say, yep, like it was bad weather. I could have had more foresight. It's not going to happen again. That's what you got to do. A lot of people I've found, and I used to do this and I still do it in some respects, more personal now, but even professionally too. Sometimes you take it as a personal attack or a not legit criticism, especially when people are mad. Like in that case, he was expecting to hear accurate weather. People are listening. And now the person whose one job it is to get the report, it's wrong. It's expired. It's outdated. Maybe people didn't notice, but he noticed. So, that's bad because that's not the person you want to get pissed off and whatever. So you have to just, if you make a mistake like that, take it, obviously learn from it, but let the people in charge know that you messed up. Let them know, like, yep, I hear you. I got it. It's not going to happen again. So then they'll be like, maybe they'll be more like alert to make sure you don't screw up, but that's how you build your trust back quicker. Because the last thing I want to do is go through that, think, well, he or she didn't learn and, they can't handle the criticism. So, they're not taking it seriously because we're just trying to make them better. So,
yeah, but there were more positives than negatives. Like you were doing a great job. Things were going well. You're young in your career. You're doing these learning experiences, but there's nothing absolutely wrong with that. Like you're learning, which is great. Like not a lot of people have that opportunity fresh out of college, but even though things are going well, the WWE opportunity happens. I know you, but even now thinking back, I'm kind of confused of how it all came together. Take us through the process of how you got hired by the WWE.
Well, so I was not actively trying to leave the radio industry / Syracuse area, whatever. However, the reality is super entry level, which I was, it's super part-time. So I was getting more and more opportunities Like I was working as one of the people alongside yourself and Josh at the time, who was doing the Syracuse Chiefs games, giving score updates and running the board and working with the broadcast on the score. And I would be on the air as a DJ Sunday afternoons, and then I would still do some traffic, but it was super part-time. The pay was not good. So I had another job at the Apple store at Destiny USA in Syracuse. So I was working literally probably from like, I would say September of 2014 through like May of next year, with the exception of like Christmas and Thanksgiving Day. I literally worked every single day that whole time. My off days at Apple, I was working at the radio station. Some days I would work at the radio station, then go to Apple, or vice versa. So I had to make money, and I wanted to stay doing the job, like in radio and media. So I was doing that. But I wanted to move to the New York City market eventually, because I mean, that's where my family is. And that's like kind of the market I feel everybody kind of wants to work at, even if it's temporary. That's where that's where the show happens. That's the top, I guess, getting called up to the show if you're a broadcaster to work
Right.
in some capacity in New York City or that area. So WWE, World Wrestling Entertainment, is located in Stamford, Connecticut, which is basically like the sixth borough of New York City. It's super close to the city, really easy to drive to. The train lines go directly from Grand Central to Stamford. So I was technically like a city suburb, and it's the only part of like New England where actual people from New England would be like, "No, that's not a New England." Everybody there's a Yankee fan, and once you get past New Haven, then the Red Sox fans show up. Okay, so, but my friend, another Oswego alumna, my friend Courtney, worked there, and she said, "Hey, I know you're trying to get a job in New York City. I just got hired at WWE." She wasn't doing video production, but she had a communications degree, I believe, and she said, "Hey, here's a recruiter. You want to talk to him?" I said, "Absolutely." So I spoke to this guy, this recruiter there, hooked me up with an interview, went down to Stamford. First time I ever went to Connecticut in my life. I drove through all these huge mansions. And if anybody's ever been to like Fairfield County and the New York, Connecticut border, it's just like a massive, massive amount of like, I can't even believe these houses exist. They're so big. So in my little Toyota Yaris, driving with no hubcaps, driving through, and I see Porsches and Ferraris and, all these Jeeps, and I'm just like, oh, look at me. Who's the outsider here? So, but I drove, did the interview, and waited 2 months. And then in November.
Wait, was the interview at the Titan Tower, like the legendary Titan Tower?
My interview was not at Titan Tower because the TV studio was not in that building.
Okay.
The TV studio was a discreet location, real close, but it wasn't there. So I did, and that didn't help because I'm driving past it. I was actually like 5 minutes late to the interview because I couldn't find the building. It's like an unmarked building. So I'm like calling them, but it's not like a cell phone. So it keeps going to the directory. So I'm driving past this building and I'm freaking out and I'm trying to call them and nobody's answering me. So I'm just like, I'm going to blow this. Holy shit. This is my one chance. I drove all the way from Syracuse for this shit and I'm going to miss it. Freaking out, sweating in my little Yaris. I almost get T-boned 3 times because I'm just trying to blow past streets to get there on time. And I made it. And somebody was in front of me in an interview, so they didn't even know I was late. But naturally, the smart thing to do was to tell them, sorry, I'm late. Because I was like, you got to be honest.
Yeah.
So, but they didn't. They're like, what? What do you mean you're late? And then I was like, oh, no.
But the interview went well, and you got hired.
It did go well. I found out later there was like 30 people they were interviewing or considering, and they hired 2, me and somebody else. So that was history. I got hired. I moved from Syracuse. My last day working in the radio station was that Sunday. My last day at Apple was on Tuesday, and I was working at WWE on Thursday.
Amazing. Insane. So take us through it. The day in the life of a WWE employee. For most people, they hear that is their dream job. You're not in the ring, but you are getting your paycheck signed by the World Wrestling Entertainment. That's true. Take us through it. Day in the life. And at least early on in year 1. Things may have adjusted after that, though.
So I was hired as a production assistant, which I guess more in TV than in radio, but any sort of production, because I can't just say TV now, but TV, social media, news, PA, production assistant is like the bottom of the barrel. It's like the bottom of the barrel, and then there's that little place underneath it. Like that's where the PAs go. So that's where I got hired as a PA. And I got hired specifically because the WWE Network, which is now on Peacock, they just launched it within the last year, and they were really trying to expedite their content, all the old footage, because there's so much shit that they have, like all the WWE shows, but like every wrestling promotion ever they have. So they're like, we need to get all that old stuff on the thing so people will subscribe. So for the first year and a half or so of my time there, me and my whole team, we were called the legacy department. We would take all of these old shows, and it would depend. Like this month, it's going to be WCW. Next month, we're going to do ECW. The next month, we're going to do Raw and SmackDown from the 90s and 2000s. So eventually, if you go on the network or Peacock, all the episodes of Raw and SmackDown and WCW and stuff from the past, all those, me and a few of my colleagues did, all of them. Probably like 45% of the old content on there, if not half, was my fingerprints are on in some way, shape, or form. So
just to clarify, cut out the commercials, edit out swear words.
Well, okay. Not swear words, but take the commercials out. Also, a lot of the big work was taking out stuff that we don't have the rights to. Movie trailers, music, like WWE used music and either contracts expired or nobody gave a shit then. So they just played it. And now that they're a big company, they're like, well, we can't play this AC/DC song for free. We didn't even ask permission the first time. So wrestlers have theme songs got to replace. And, I don't know if you know this, but wrestling has not always been a PC crowd. So there's a lot of bad, awkward chants, a lot of bad signs. So if you weren't like a white Southern guy, you were probably offended. So we had to clean up some of the rough edges, especially now. But that was pretty much what I did when I started. And then eventually it branched into editing. So I would do like highlight reels or trailers for like best ofs for the superstars or wrestlers. They call the wrestlers superstars.
Ooh, leave it right there, because I know I've heard a story about this one. Was one of those wrestlers in particular Edge? Didn't you have a situation with Edge?
I didn't. So I did a piece on Edge. They released a collection. They were called collections. It was like 50 moments in their career, matches, interviews. And to promote it, we would cut the trailer, and it would go on YouTube and on the WWE network, and they would send it places to promote it. So I would cut a bunch. I did cut one on Edge, which I thought came out pretty good. I have since lost access to it because I no longer work there. But it was one of the better things I cut, I think. And now he's back, which I'm sure we'll talk about at some point and mention what's happening currently. But yeah, he's back.
Wait a second. Is it not Edge? I could have sworn a WWE superstar came in the production room with you and was like thanking you for how well the production was in a certain cut. Was it Christian? Or maybe just in my mind, I could have sworn someone came in the production room and actually like the Dwayne Wade commercial with Scott Van Pelt years ago, where he actually was watching your stuff with you.
So, I mean, well, the one thing that might have happened. So one time, Cesaro, who is currently a superstar there, I cut something on him. He was on a team with Sheamus. They were a team called The Bar. And I cut a trailer for their highlight collection thing. And he tweeted out the video and posted something that said, like, this is the best thing I've ever seen or something like that. And he
there
posted,
it is. Thank you.
It's his Twitter account. And another time, Matt Hardy, I cut something on the Hardy Boys after they returned at that WrestleMania in Orlando. And I cut one for them. And then he retweeted it, something like, this is why we do what we do, something like that. So actually, a funny story. So I eventually started traveling and working backstage, which isn't like a subtle thing, but I had not gotten there in my retelling to you chronologically. And it was like 3 weeks after Cesaro tweeted that and it was published. So I went up to him. He had a couple moments. And I was like, hey, so just want you to know, I'm the guy who cut that thing on you and Sheamus. And he looked at me like I wasn't even speaking any of the 5 languages he speaks. And he was like, what are you talking about? What video? And then he like walked away. And I was like, oh, well, okay.
Well,
like, I'm just going to go run into the ring and get my ass kicked now. Thanks.
Well, going behind the scenes, WrestleMania. You've been behind the scenes at WrestleMania that we shared on our social media platforms.
Yeah.
The picture of you basically looking like Brock Lesnar guy flexing on. Take us through behind the scenes at WrestleMania.
That was my first WrestleMania in Orlando. The first WrestleMania I got hired when I was an employee was the one in Dallas at AT&T Stadium where the Cowboys play. That was the first one where I worked there. The first one I went to was the next year, 33, I think it was, in Orlando. That's when the Hardy Boys came back that I mentioned. And I used to have on all my social medias, my picture was me on the stage with my hands out, posing like this in my suit because I had just worked. It was like 1 a.m. They took that picture. All the wrestlers were about to party. All the crowd left. And we were doing staff pictures on the ramp. And I was like, I'm here, like in this amazing, huge vicinity, this awesome venue at this great moment, which I thought at the time was Undertaker's last match. It's like we just saw a historic wrestling moment, and now I get to pose here. So as cliche as it sounds, I was like soaking it in because you never know if that's going to be the last WrestleMania you go to, or I guess the last Super Bowl you would go to. It's akin to that in the wrestling industry. WrestleMania is like the Super Bowl of wrestling, as they say.
I think we should just clarify this too. As amazing as that is for the career side of it, when you're talking about traveling and being on the road, you are working these events in a professional spot, or you've already finished your obligations for production and you're just going as a fan?
So the good thing about WWE is that they gave you a lot of opportunity to do other things. Like when I got hired to boost up the archives of the WWE network, but it turned into, creative editing, like when I would make the trailers for stuff. And then it would turn into opportunities to go on the road, whether it was to be crew for an interview for a documentary they were making, or to help with Raw or SmackDown or NXT or a pay-per-view, helping backstage with the production. So I would go backstage, I would have a headset. I'd be connected to Kevin Dunn, who is the head of television and directing the show. And I would work with the stage managers, the wrestlers, all the people, and running paperwork back and forth, shuttling a superstar from here to here, giving somebody a cue, confiscating a sign because somebody said something they don't want to promote, like an AEW Rock shirt or a swear word or something they didn't want to advertise. So that wasn't my day job. Those people who go on the road go to every single show, but they would bring in some new faces. They would need people to bring the footage back after the show airs, which is primarily why I would go and help out backstage. And then I'd have to catch the first flight out with all these footage. So going through TSA with your bag and then 4 huge bags of metal and equipment, I don't know, they always thought I was trying to sneak some sort of illegal weapon or something, because they always opened it. They did a little bomb swab. They would always grill me. And I'm like, I'm in Evansville, Indiana. It's 4 a.m. I don't want to be here. Let me just leave. There's 6 people in the airport, and including 2 janitors. What are we doing?
Right.
So
on social media, by the way, people are going to accuse you and I of photoshopping this picture. I know it's real because I follow you on social media.
Okay.
Take us through the story behind you and Becky Lynch.
Okay. So that was actually backstage at a Raw. That was when Becky Lynch, right before she became, like right on the cusp of her becoming the biggest star in wrestling as a whole. It was on her rise to the WrestleMania in New York, I believe, when she beat Ronda Rousey and Charlotte to get both titles. It was just backstage at a Raw, and the script called for Becky Lynch talking to crew backstage, getting ready for her. I don't know if it was a match or an in-ring segment, but it was like, coming up next, Becky Lynch was the thing that they said on commentary. So I was just not doing anything in a moment, and I hear some of the other production people going like, who's Becky going to be talking to? And then one of the people just like, they called me Monge. Like, Monge, get over here. You're talking to Becky in 30 seconds. Like, what? What do you mean I'm talking to Becky Lynch? So I'm like, I literally run over there. Remember how I said I don't like running? Well, I was running this time. Because it was like, these arenas are huge. So it was the end of this huge hallway, and they scream to me, and I run over there. And then Kevin Dunn is on the mic. He's just like, who's Becky talking to? And we didn't need to rehearse it because we weren't saying anything of substance. But I was like, what do? I've never been on before. My whole thing was, I felt like I looked like garbage. I felt like I was sweaty. And then she just looked at me and she was like, just say like watermelon, slowly, quickly, just mouth it to look like we're talking. So I'm like, okay. So I don't say words because when you watch on TV, there's bumper music playing. They're just commentating, previewing what's coming next. So all the audience sees is us talking, but we're not actually talking, or so I thought. So I'm like saying watermelon slowly, and then Becky is like saying words, or she's like, why are you saying watermelon? Like, what's wrong with you? So I'm trying not to laugh because she's ribbing me live on TV. And then, and I didn't get a chance to practice. I didn't even know if I was blocked right, but it was fine because they didn't edit it out of the final version when the show was done. So, but that's real. That's a real photo. That was
just 2 follow-ups on that quick. Do you remember the date so people can go back and watch it on Peacock if they don't want to see the full clip?
Look at that plug. It was on February I want to say of 2019, somewhere February 2019. It was a Monday Night Raw. So if you look at all the Raws from February 2019, you'll find me in there. Towards the end of the show, casually just chilling with Becky. I'm
Also,
sure if I look at my phone, I could tell you the exact date.
No, it's okay. We'll have people search through it. It'll be better for the Peacock network and everything else. Get those clicks.
Okay.
Also, just height wise, there's the old story I've heard that like people backstage aren't allowed to wear like lifts in their shoes because it needs to make the superstars bigger. I think you and Becky are the same height. Is she actually that tall, or did they? Is that the magic of the media camera back there,
or am I just that short? You know, I mean, I'm like 5. I say 5'8". My wife says 5'7". So it depends. We'll just average it to 5'9", you know? So I'll just jump up and she's not that short. She's probably like 5'5", I guess.
I ask because Rhea Ripley seems to be the tallest 5'9" person I've ever seen some of these backstage things.
I will say they do exaggerate and undersell heights and weights depending on the character, the gimmick. So Rhea Ripley is genuinely tall. I think Becky Lynch, you would say, is probably an average sized height, somebody you would expect. Or I'm just abnormally small. I don't know.
Okay.
I definitely never won a height award. That's for sure. So.
You look very normal sitting down on this podcast. So I just know people are going to look at that and be like, Becky Lynch is not that tall. They're just going to, that's my first thing that jumped out to you knowing you. I'm like, all right. So,
I also think she was one step closer to the camera than I was.
Okay. So the magic of camera worked there.
If you want to think about blocking, that's how you do it, folks. A couple steps can make all the difference.
That's right. You know, we mentioned earlier, you did in a certain voice, Vince McMahon. Have you at all ever had a run-in with Vince McMahon?
Yeah. So whenever I would be backstage at the shows, my job as not like the full-time road guy would be to take the production sheets and give them to everybody important. So commentary, all the tech guys on ringside who do like the lights and the pyrotechnics and the sound, all the guys backstage, the stage directors, a couple of superstars if they have big segments, and everybody in, they call it Gorilla, which is the position right like that controls the show. That's where Vince McMahon sits. That's where all like the heavy hitters sit. So I had to take the production sheets and give them to all those guys. So every single time Vince was there, most shows, every single time I would go and Vince would be there and I'd have to hand him the show. Usually the show sheets would come out after the show started, which was great for production wise. Cause they're like, oh, the show's live and we have no idea what we're doing. So Vince McMahon is like calling the show and I'm like trying to interrupt him to like hand him these sheets that he needs. So one time he was on the headset and I didn't hear him on the headset, but Kevin Dunn did. And he was like screaming. He's just like, where are the sheets? And I'm standing there and I'm just like, Mr. McMahon here. I have them here, sir. How are you? And he's like, thank you, son. So professionally, I met him. And then in Titan Towers was the company gym, And one time it was a Saturday, my wife and I went and there was nobody else there. So I was like, great, we could just work out and look as ugly as possible, just sweating, you know, just not have to worry about keeping good form, or we could take as long a break as we want, no pressure. Gyms are tough crowds these days.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, especially that lifestyle, right?
So I was in there, nobody else was there. And all of a sudden I see, and Vince, if you see this guy, you know, it's Vince McMahon's personal trainer. He walks in and I tell my wife, I'm like, Vince McMahon is about to walk in. And she didn't believe me. And then 2 minutes later, Vince McMahon walks in. We're in this little side room doing like a
Is no Peloton chance in hell playing? No chance, but no.
Oh my goodness. I wish. No, he just walks in so casual in like a tracksuit. This jacked 70-plus-year-old man walks in. He like does the Vince McMahon walk. Look at a gif of Vince McMahon walking. A little more subdued, but still legit. That's real. And he walks in, he like looks at us, and then he's just like breaking a sweat. I like it. And then him and his trainer start just pounding weights in the other room. So and I was just like, well, this was unexpected.
This is everything I hoped and dreamed for in that story. Oh, it's so good. SummerSlam is this upcoming weekend. Preview, are you excited? Are you still watching the products? I'll save the next question for this because you are still a wrestling fan at heart. What do you think about this year's SummerSlam with the return of John Cena and more?
Well, let me tell you something. I think one of the big things that us wrestling fans have always critiqued in general is how Roman Reigns was always pushed as a big star, but the fans never took to him. Finally, Roman Reigns is the biggest star in the industry, and he's doing it so well. This head of the table, the stuff with the Usos, just the best championship reign maybe in like of this modern era with that championship. He looks legit. It's all everything they could have hoped for. So this match with John Cena is great. 2 years ago, this would have been like an eye roll. You never would have wanted this to happen. But now it's like, what other match would you possibly want? Like, this is the match. It's legit. And I don't think John Cena's going to win, but they're selling out the new stadium in Vegas for this show, So, and that's the match you do. I'm excited for it. It'll be okay. I don't know how the undercard is going to go, but we'll see. I think that's the match that everybody's looking forward to, especially, with all the talk that, in AEW, CM Punk and Daniel Bryan are going to show up at any day now. That's the match they could do. And for the first time, it actually feels like Roman Reigns deserves this spot, because the other rumors are The Rock and Roman Reigns at WrestleMania. So how do you get Dwayne Johnson to come back? He doesn't just come back for anybody. It's got to be like the biggest thing going on. And I think that's finally, I think Roman Reigns is actually in that spot. And I'm excited for that match. I might only watch that match. But if I had to pick just one, that would be the one for sure.
Big fight feel. It's got that term a few times. For those big four with SummerSlam, Survivor Series, WrestleMania, Royal Rumble, the big fight feel is there. Now, usually I close the podcast with this question, but I'm going to give you this question and then another one to follow it. So for those who have listened to this podcast, they're like, oh my God, like John has worked my dream job. Since I was a kid, I've always wanted to work for the WWE. What is your best advice to somebody young listening or somebody changing their career path to get where you were, and we'll follow up with that in a second, to land a job with the WWE?
Yes. So I would say definitely be open to everything. One of the good pieces of advice that I got when I was working at WWE was take no out of your vocabulary when it comes to professional opportunities, especially when you're young and coming up, because if you're trying to join the media industry at all, as much as they say like you got to support people and support the industry, it's very cutthroat. And what can you do to differentiate yourself from somebody else? Say you've never been that, say you don't have the ear necessarily for editing that well. It takes you a little bit longer. You don't get concepts, just for an example. But every time somebody says, who wants to do this? Who wants to do that? Who's available on Saturday to go do this? Or who wants to go to the airport and pick up this person coming in, on your day off? Yeah, it sucks leaving to drive to JFK, like the 2 days after Thanksgiving to pick up somebody coming, but you take that opportunity. You say yes right off the bat. Don't give people time to answer. Eventually, people are going to remember you're going to be the guy or girl who's going to do that stuff. And then you'll get the first dibs on the stuff you actually want to do. Who wants to go interview this person? Who wants a chance to do this? Or, hey, what do you think about this? Do you know how often people get asked in low positions what you want to do for something? Never. Nobody asks you that because they don't give a shit, because you're just low and they don't know you and you don't have the experience to give an actual opinion that could help,
Yes.
So I would say definitely, especially when you're young. I know young is subjective, but when you're young in your career, young at your first big job that you would say like, this is a career path I want to pursue, don't like work yourself to death. But also, if you have to stay longer, come in earlier, take on more than you think you can handle, do it. Because while, like I was saying, you might not be the best at everything, the more you say yes to, the more you'll learn, help yourself overall, and you will reflect better compared to somebody else. So when it comes to raises or promotions or opportunities, guess who gets that opportunity first? You do, not the person who just does the required hours and goes on. That's the best way, I think, to go forward, is to take on all you can earlier, so later you get a chance to be a little bit more picky, but also you have the trust of the people who matter and you can rise up and work with them, because that's how they got there. Nobody just gets there from just, getting hired. Nobody got hired right out of college to be a senior producer and makes decisions. It's just not something that happens.
Once you're there, make sure they want you to let you know you want to be there, and you'll say it back to them. I want to be here, and here's how I want to be here. We're going to make it happen.
Exactly. That's
now,
it.
Your life has taken some interesting curves and twists over the last 12 to 18 months. You are now post WWE. Tell us as much or as little as you want to talk about your departure from the company and what your plans are for the future.
I have been, if you're a wrestling fan, you know the meta joke, future endeavored. I have been future endeavored by WWE, as so many wrestlers and employees in my wake have done. Obviously, COVID 2020, 2021, most of it has been just this shit show, this crazy time. So there was a lot of cuts in media in general, and just across the board, people lost jobs because, you can't have, some places literally you couldn't work. They were closed. So I was fortunate to survive as long as I did in that environment. A few months ago, there were some budget cuts, and unfortunately, me and a bunch of colleagues who were really, really good at their jobs. I don't just say that for any reason except that it's true. There was really, really good people. I would say the lifeblood of the production department. Some of the really good ones got let go alongside me, just because they needed to make changes. They needed to cut some people, and I was unfortunately one of the people who was chosen. However, they decided to cut me. So it sucks. It's getting better, because I'm, didn't want to leave, but we'll see where that takes me, So in life, I'm moving, bought my first house. So, that's a big life step. And hopefully I can transition to one of these jobs in the city market and see what happens there. But WWE is a cool business. There's a lot of connections. There's a lot of, people know the name, especially now. I mean, they have partners everywhere. So, hopefully I'll find the right connection. They'll see it and they'll say, hey, let's talk about it and go from there. So I'm a little bummed out still, but we just move up and on, and there's, I guess, no real hard feelings. It wasn't personal. It's just a bummed out. But I will say, and not that this is like reassuring, so take this, but my boss said, and he said it kidding, but I'm pretty sure he wasn't kidding. He said, if you work in TV or media and you don't get laid off at least 3 times, you're not actually living the life. And I said, well, that makes me feel better and worse at the same time. So, maybe this is a rite of passage. Maybe I'll be able to go back one day. Maybe, it's just the end of this chapter, but it was great. And I learned a lot, and that's a good spot. I was able to do a lot of cool stuff, a lot of diverse things, every type of TV or internet production that you could do. I've had my hands on it some way. So I think that sets me up better for whatever the next thing is.
Absolutely. That's totally right. Congratulations, by the way. You are a married man, as you mentioned there. It's been weird
Thanks.
to go from being college kids to having
I know.
A wife and a kid and a house in my end and everything else. And
Yeah.
by the way, if one of those spots is Gozilla Media, I'll start the recruiting. You keep your phone on after this. We got a nice podcast called White Heat about wrestling. I would not mind if John Carter or whatever name you want to go by on Gozilla Media makes a guest appearance as a co-host. I will start my recruiting for you if you have any interest and maybe come back to this side of it, rather being from behind the camera to back in front of the camera for you and microphone and everything else.
Look, man, I could talk for days. So, and I have a lot of opinions, and I want to share them with whoever will listen. Ask my wife. She just tells me to shut up all the time because I just have so many things to say. So you want me, like I said before we went on the air, my phone, most people will call me. I'll let it ring, but you call me, I'll pick up on the second ring. And that's legit.
Yes, I appreciate that. I'll call you John Carter one more time because I like saying it so much. John, I appreciate you spending the time and sharing these stories. And yes, I hope very soon we'll be talking about what your plans might be for the rest of 2021, my friend. Good to get the lunch club back together. Next time we're back in Houston, we'll get Jack to eat some lunch with us too.
We got to get them Tully tenders, man. That's what we got to do.
That's what I'm talking about. All right, my friend. I'll catch you later.
Thank you.